Okay guys, we're going to be exploring some different acrylic painting techniques, and I'm going to talk through the setup here, but basically we're going to be going through some different techniques, and you will, when we're done with this, we will be creating our own painting on one of these canvas boards, and you guys will get a lot of choice with this, but we're going to explore a bunch of different things first. So you've seen this one around the room, but here's kind of my cacti painting that I worked on for an example for you guys, okay? So that was done on my canvas, and you guys will get to do that same thing. So we are going to look at 3 techniques here today, and I'm going to make sure that you have the materials you need for that. So for this setup, we are going to be using our sketchbook paper. If you have sketchbook paper in your sketchbook, please take it out. If you already have it hole punched, that's fine. If you want to hole punch it later, that's okay too, because obviously these are not going to be able to go back into our sketchbook because they're going to be wet, okay? So for these first 3 techniques that we are going to need, or to do, we're going to need a few things, okay? So you will need to have your ice cube paint palette, your ice cube tray of paint, 1 per table. And then you are going to need one of these containers of sand, which you can find over by the sinks. Doesn't matter what color it is because it's not going to matter. So use that. And then you're going to need a container like this that says gesso, okay? And we will get back to, it looks like white paint, but it is not, and I will explain that later. Some of the other things that you're going to need for this first 3 techniques we're going to do, you're going to need your paintbrushes. Those should be in your bin. And then water cup, and you will want a paper towel. So that should do us for that first setup. Oh, and then the other thing that you're going to need, I have a little container of these round pieces of tissue paper. You will want to have 1 or 2 of these per person. If we run out of the round ones, you can just rip the bigger sheets and just get a little piece. So that is what we need to get set up here, okay? So I am going to pause the video for a second, and you guys can get your materials that you need. I'm going to go over them, put them all in a frame here. So you need to have the gesso, your paint palette, sand, brushes, paper to paint on, water cup, paper towel, and your tissue paper to get started with. And we'll talk about all the other things. Make sure to have a sloppy copy down on your surface. So go get set up for your painting. Okay, so now that we are back and you guys are all set up, we are going to label and go through these first 3 techniques. So I don't care how you choose to divide them up. If you want to get funky and creative with it, you can, but I'm not going to because I'm lazy. Okay, but we're gonna explore 3 techniques on each page. So I'm just gonna go up here, I'm gonna draw a line, and I'm gonna divide this into 3 kind of equal sections. Now those aren't very even, but you get the idea. So in this top one here, I am going to write tissue paper. So go ahead, write that down. In this section here, I am going to write sand. Okay. And then in this section here, I am going to write my favorite word to say, Sgraffito. It is spelled very, very weird, but Sgraffito. Okay. So make sure that your first sheet here looks like mine. Okay. So once you have that written down, and if we can pause the video if you need to see it on screen for a second, but we are going to go ahead and get started with our first technique. And I have some of these I have already done for you guys to see as a little bit of an example, but we won't get back to this one. This page takes a little prep work, so we actually will come back and finish this one later, okay? So here, this is going to be kind of what that final tissue paper technique looks like. You can see that there's lots of little ridges and details. It's what I use for the background of this on here. So to get started, what you need is you are going to need that gesso to start. So what gesso is, it does look like white paint, but it's just a primer. It's an acrylic primer that kind of helps creates a nice surface for our paintings. So what you need to do is, and don't do this yet, I just want you to watch first and then we'll pause the video and you guys will have some time to explore it. So take the gesso, and on here, and if you want to do this 2 times to create more space to kind of practice more than once, you are more than welcome to do that. But I'm going to just kind of put this white gesso down on the paper in this area. And then I'm going to take my piece of tissue paper and I'm going to kind of crumple it up. And then I'm going to pat it down so that it kind of sticks like that, okay? And things are overlapped. It might not cover that entire section, which is okay. And you might want to practice this a couple of times, so I would recommend doing it again. So putting that down, the gesso down, crumpling it up, and putting it back over top. So now what we want to do, we are going to take that gesso again, and we are going to go over top of the tissue paper to create a nice texture. So we want it to be very flat. So you don't want any of the color of that tissue paper showing. So you're getting it as flat down as you can, and this is kind of acting like a glue to the paper. And tomorrow when you guys come back to this one, it will be it'll be dry and nice and flat, and it will be kind of a cool painting surface to look at. Okay. If you feel like you need another coat, do so. But that looks pretty good right now. I can still see a little bit of that colored tissue paper coming through, but that's okay. We don't want a whole lot of paint there. Okay, so this is our first one, and like I said, we will get back to, you can kind of see what that looks like. We'll get back to this one tomorrow. So go ahead and take some time to try this one out. Okay, now the next one that we're gonna do, I hope you guys didn't rinse out your brush because we're gonna need that gesso filled brush right now. We'll rinse it off after this one. So this next one, we're gonna do something very, very similar, except we're gonna be using the sand. And what this is gonna do is this is just gonna kind of create a grainy texture on the surface. So I'm gonna go ahead and I am going to, once again, put the gesso down first. And I'm gonna do 2 spots again, just so I have some more time to explore later on. And now, you can just take your fingers, please don't dump it on, don't dump it on. Use your fingers and just kind of sprinkle on top of this. Just cover that area. It's gonna move around again in just a minute, so don't worry about it not being super, super even. And I know I'm getting a little bit over on my tissue paper section here, so just be careful. Won't be a big deal if you do, but just kind of keep that in mind. So the more sand that you have on there, the more texture that there is going to be. So now once you have that sprinkled on, take your gesso and get enough of this because we don't want to dip it back into this gesso container and get it filled with sand. I'm just going to kind of go over top. And you can kind of start to see, I'm going to move this up, how that is creating a little bit of some glumpy texture there. So this one, notice I can't really like brush it on. I'm kind of more like daubing it on. So just be very careful as you do this and get that covered in. Don't overmix this one because it will dry on its own. So another way we could do this one too, if you think it's a little bit easier, is you can take a piece of cardboard like as your mixing palette, and you can actually put a little gesso on it first and then sprinkle the sand in it and then actually like mix it around to create more of that texture that you could actually paint with it. That might be easier for some of you, just depending on what you're doing. So those are your two options. Go ahead and let's get this sand technique put down. Okay, so for this next technique, Sgraffito, I don't need my gesso anymore, but I did rinse out my brush, so you can use your water cup and your paper towel to get that dried off, or remember, you can always wipe off that extra paint on your sloppy copy. So for this one, we're not going to see the full effects of it until tomorrow, so I would just pick a color or two. I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to, I'm going to do a couple of different ones here. So I'm just going to paint, I got to move this so I can paint. I'm just going to paint a solid blue swatch here. Just very even. I don't want it to be super thick. Okay. And then I'm going to kind of mix a couple colors down here on this one. So I'm going to start with this blue. And guys, you can totally use the same colors I'm using if you don't want to think about it. You don't have to, but that's just up to you. Now I'm gonna take my popsicle stick, scoop a little yellow onto here so I don't get my yellow dirty there. I'm gonna blend and mix these together a little bit. And notice these don't have to be perfect, they're just little blocks. So I'm gonna go ahead and we will get back to these three techniques tomorrow. So go ahead and by the end of this one right here, your paper should look like mine, okay? And we will get back to exploring these techniques tomorrow.